Yo, Goldwings42 here, recording the podfic for Learning How to Live Again, Am I Truly Worth It? By nstlgia over on AO3. It's a it's rated teen up audiences with no archive warnings apply, and it's in the My Hero Academia fandom. Alright, fic summary is... Izuku was on his last thread, bullied by his best friend, neglected by his mother, quirkless in a heavily bigoted society, and told by his idol that he could never be a hero. So, he gave himself an ultimatum. If nothing got better in a year, he would end his life. However, if he somehow accidentally died during his night clandestine activities, he wouldn't be too upset. A certain underground hero gets in the way of his plans, but is it enough to keep him alive? So that's the fic summary. And today, I'm just going to be recording chapter 1, which I started recording a while ago. The recording came out really bad, though, because I was recording in a noisy environment, so I had to wait a bit until I could record somewhere quieter. So sorry this took so long, nstlgia. I know I sent out the request a couple weeks ago, but doesn't matter. We're here for chapter 1, so here's the notes. Who said there were too many vigilantes, Izuku and Aizawa fics? A lot of people probably, but oh well. General trigger warnings for this include suicidal thoughts and idealization of self-harm, dark/depressing thoughts, eating disorder, and some canonical violence. If there's any more, I will add them as necessary. Tags will be updated as the story progresses. I am projecting my thoughts and feelings onto Izuku for the most part, so heads up for that. This is something for me to kind of use as a coping mechanism. Probably not healthy, because I've been in a pretty bad place lately. Enjoy the fic! That's nstlgia's notes, and yeah, maybe some therapy. Wow, that's so condescending, and why can I not think of the word? Whatever, I should go to therapy too. We all should go to therapy. Everybody needs therapy, but nobody gets it, so whatever. And now, chapter 1. When Izuku glances down at the street below from where he's sitting on the rooftop, all he could think was, damn, that's a long way down. He swung his legs back and forth, leaning back on his hands as he stared into the dark expanse of the sky. The burn on his shoulder was irritating him. His skin, thanks to Kachan, Bakugou, whatever. It would definitely hinder his route tonight, but he's fought worse. As he was about to contemplate his next move, he heard the quietest shuffle from behind him. He almost wouldn't have noticed it, but he had a lot of practice. Izuku quickly rolled to the side, ignoring the sharp pain that sent tingles down his whole left side. The capture weapon sailed past him, just barely missing. Izuku sprang up with more energy than he thought he could manage. Eraser! Fancy seeing you here! Eraserhead grunted, bringing his capture back to his hand. He only seemed mildly annoyed, which was better than fully annoyed. Why must you insist on always sitting so close to the edge? I'm developing gray hairs because of you. The hero grumbled, the lower half of his face tucked into the scarf. Izuku shrugged, placing his hands on his hips. For fun. For fun, Eraserhead repeated in a deadpan tone. It's a little bit of a gamble. Will I fall off? Will I not? This time I didn't. This time? Oh, we need to look at the time, Izuku said, holding up his right wrist to look at a fake watch. Gotta go! Izuku spared no time rushing off the side of the roof, not missing the muttered brat that came from behind him. He caught onto an emergency escape ladder that he knew was there, sliding down and jumping off from about 4 feet up to the ground. Izuku had done this about 1,000,000 times, but he knew it would still give Eraserhead a mild heart attack. Once out of sight, he knew the underground hero wouldn't bother chasing him. He crouched behind a dumpster, letting his face scrunch into pain. The burn cream was not working. Truly, how would it? The burn was in such an inconvenient spot that he knew he didn't cover the whole wound. The sludge he was still coughing up probably didn't help either. Taking a few deep breaths, he stood up straight and did what he did best. Ignore it. He ran into Eraserhead only once more that night, and somehow it turned into a lecture. Izuku was fighting off some random folk who thought harassing a woman was cool, and luckily the guy was distracted enough for her to run away. Not luckily, he had a few good hits on Izuku, which is where Eraserhead came in. The hero must have been watching, for once he was relieved by the intervention. He sagged against the brick wall of the building, catching his breath and willing the shooting pains to stop. It was like taking candy from a baby for him. The man was knocked out after only a total of 3 seconds of fighting. While trying to fight, Eraserhead, his hands zip-tied behind his back. Izuku was sure that the police would be here any moment. You were slow, Eraserhead said, voice piercing quiet. Sloppy. What if I told you about fighting while injured? Izuku rolled his eyes, pushing off the wall. Of course he noticed. That I shouldn't do it? Something like that. He responded, feigning confusion. That got a glare from the hero. Izuku smiled, and even though he was wearing a mask, he was sure the crinkling around his eyes gave away his expression. The worst part was that he was right. He was sloppy and slow. This guy should have been a piece of cake to take down. He was drunk, but he hit hard. Izuku didn't know when to quit. You'll get yourself killed, Eraserhead continued, whatever. Izuku scoffed. You have no idea. Sirens sounded from a few blocks away. That was his cue. Alright, Eraser, see you around? Izuku quipped, already on his way out. This conversation isn't over. Eraserhead marked at his back. Izuku waved goodbye, not bothering to respond. The way back to the apartment wasn't the hardest track, but it could have been better. Climb up to his window was even worse. Trying his hardest not to make a sound so he didn't wake up his mom, he maneuvered himself into his room as quietly as possible. After closing the window, he took off his sweatshirt, hissing through his teeth when he stretched his shoulder. Water. Turning his back and looking over his shoulder to see his wound in the mirror, he grimaced. It seemed to be a second or third degree burn, though not the worst Bakugou had ever given him. Izuku sighed and threw his sweatshirt into the closet and took his mask off as well. He rubbed his jaw, where the guy had managed to hit him. He would have to ice that later. Glancing at the clock, he saw that it was nearly 3 a.m. School was going to suck tomorrow. Sitting on the edge of his bed, Izuku put his head in his hands, the exhaustion, mental and physical, weighing on him heavily. The memories from the day were hitting him now, and he could feel a panic attack coming. Izuku... Bakugou burning his notebook, telling him to jump off the roof, getting caught by the sludge bill and almost dying, meaning All Might. Shit, how is it that he met All Might today? In his weak form, too. It felt like it happened weeks ago, and not just mere hours. If he told this to his 4-year-old self that he had met his idol and subsequently hated him, he'd probably look at older Izuku like he grew a second head. Okay, maybe hate wasn't a strong word, but telling Izuku his dream was useless because of his worthlessness didn't really boost morale. The question was disingenuous now anyways. Izuku had long since given up on his dream to go to UA. He had a whole new plan, and he was adhering to it now. Izuku promptly ignored the voice in his head that told him if All Might had just said anything else, if one person could have believed in him. He shook his head and changed to his pajamas. There was no use dwelling on that now. When he turned the news on later that day, he was appalled to see the same sludge villain attacking Bakugou. That was his fault, he remembered thinking. Thankfully, though, it was before his ex-friend could be swallowed by the villain. All Might saved the day, as always. He had to turn the TV off with a sick feeling in his stomach. Izuku woke up at sunrise. He usually got up around this time, mostly because he didn't want to run into his mom. She could be pretty cruel in the mornings, and he was already in pain. Plus, it helped him get to school early to avoid the bullies. School was shitty as always. Surprisingly, though, not much attention from Bakugou. Whether it was because of the sludge villain fight from the night before, or from sudden generosity, he was grateful. Unfortunately, his burn wasn't getting any better. Much worse, actually. He didn't think he was getting infected, but he couldn't treat this by himself. His mom was a nurse. He could ask her. If she would actually help him, though, was another thing entirely. Izuku brushed himself. Izuku busied himself with homework and cooking dinner. He made enough for the two of them, but he only ate a small portion. He wasn't that hungry. When he finished eating, the door opened and his mom came through with a tight expression. Well, it was now or never. Hey Mom, how was work? Izuku asked timidly, wringing his hands when she didn't answer. She usually didn't. He did have her dinner ready for her, though, which he hoped would lighten her mood. It didn't. The silence was awkward. Well, it was for him anyways. He stood at the end of the table, fidgeting. It must have been annoyed her enough, because she sighed loudly. What, Izuku? So, can you look at my injury for me? I think it's a 3rd degree burn. He was cut off. Izuku, I just got home from a 12-hour shift. Whatever it is, I'm sure you're fine. Usually, after dismissal like that, he would give up, but it really hurt. Please? Could you look at it? You don't even have to treat it. I can... Enough! She exclaimed, slamming her chopsticks down on the table. I said no. Deal with it yourself. It's probably not even that bad. You're too sensitive. You're going to have to toughen up if you're going to live with your, condition. Your condition. It was probably the closest she'd ever gone to acknowledging it directly. Okay, sorry, Mom, you're right, he whispered, but she was already walking out of the dining room. Izuku cleaned up after and rushed to his room, closing the door quietly. She was probably right. He was overreacting. It wasn't that bad. He would put more burn cream on it and hope for the best. He did so, and he finished any other schoolwork before midnight hit. Once he was sure his mom was asleep, he put on his vigilante suit, which is really only consisted of an all-black outfit and mask over the lower half of his face. He covered his hair with the hood of his sweatshirt, pulling on the strings to tighten it a bit so it wouldn't fall off his head. Izuku stretched, careful not to injure himself further, and he was off. This patrol was more difficult than his last. He was slipping by the third moment he apprehended. He needed a short break. Weirdly, he hadn't run into Eraserhead yet. Chilling on the rooftop of a shorter building, he stayed in the shadows so he could avoid Eraserhead or any other villains that came his way. Why are you still out here tonight? Izuku let out a totally madly scream at the sudden voice that came from his left. Scrambling to stand, he winced and held his hand out in a defensive position. Then he realized it was Eraserhead. He groaned and relaxed his posture. Ugh, seriously? What the hell? You get off on sneaking up on people? Eraserhead, the bastard, shrugged. It's kind of my job description. Now stop deflecting and answer the question. Izuku brought a hand to his chin, pretending to think about it. Well, it all probably started a year ago when I decided to use my charming personality and good morals to stop some random dudes from hurting civilians. Shadow. Izuku cringed at the stupid-ass vigilante name the police gave him. I theorized his work had something to do with shadows, hence the name, and it couldn't be more unoriginal. He also didn't escape that he had been yelled at by 2 different adults in one night. If you want a more specific answer, ask a more specific question. Izuku shot back, crossing his arms over his chest. Eraserhead let out a long, suffering sigh, and Izuku internally flinched. He couldn't help but feel irrationally hurt at how annoyed their hero was because of him. He really made everyone around him miserable. Shadow, you're obviously hurt. This isn't a game. If you're going to be out here, you need to look after yourself. Why in the hell would he do that? Living on the edge was way more fun. Obviously, he didn't say that aloud because it would only anger Eraserhead more. I'm handling it, he said, and as he was definitely not handling it. This didn't fool the underground hero either. Eraserhead clicked his tongue and stepped forward, making Izuku tense. You're done for the night. Izuku bristled, taking a defensive stand again and stepping back. Says who? Says me, the licensed professional. Eraserhead stayed where he was, this time softening indefinitely? When he realized Izuku looked ready to bolt. I'm not going against our agreement, but I'm also not letting a kid die on my watch because he's too reckless to take care of himself. Instantly, Izuku wanted to snap back with a dark shrug about how he was dying anyways, no matter what, but that probably wasn't a good idea. You understand where he was coming from, unfortunately. But what was he supposed to do? Izuku couldn't afford a hospital visit, and he did not want to involve his mother after what happened. When the silence stretched, Eraserhead spoke again. Do you have someone to help you? Izuku stuck in a sharp breath at the question. No, he really didn't. He guessed his non-answer was answer enough, though. I could... Izuku interrupted him immediately. No, he was not going to do this with Eraserhead. He didn't want his pity. He didn't want to owe him anything. You could tell his answer disappointed him. Shadow, be logical about this. Whatever your injury is, it's clearly serious. You've been favoring your right side lately. But you are usually ambidextrous in your attack. You flinch whenever you pull your left shoulder. It's affecting your performance. Just let me help you. Izuku wasn't surprised by Eraserhead's overly analytical observation of him. The guy was a hero for a reason. He was mostly blaming himself for being so careless and open about it. However, he didn't need to stop to think about it. He just needed this burn to be treated, and he just couldn't do that by himself. It was stopping him from being at 100% on his patrols, which, didn't exactly concern him that much, but if he couldn't save people, what was the point? Izuku pondered for a long while, and he was shocked that Eraserhead was patient enough to wait for his answer. Eventually said, fine, but no hospitals. Eraserhead probably expected that, because he didn't protest right away. He only sighed for the 1000th time. Not ideal, but alright. I know someone who can help you, but you need to follow me. Izuku was relieved that he didn't push on the hostile part too much. He easily agreed to follow. Eraserhead was ahead of him, and he often looked back to make sure Izuku was following. Rude. Could there be a little bit more trust here? After what seemed like forever, they ended up at a relatively nice-looking house. They weren't in the red light district anymore. The hero knocked on the door and waited, and the door was opening. An old woman in sleeping robes stood in the doorway. She looked quite angry to be woken up at this hour, and Izuku didn't blame her. Who the hell was this? Eraserhead's grandma? They shared the same glare. Eraserhead, what the hell are you doing on my doorstep? She paused to check the time. Almost 2 in the morning, and who's your friend? Izuku picked up with the response, and Eraser quickly interrupted him before he could get a word out. I'm sorry for this, recovered girl, but I wouldn't be here if it weren't an emergency. I need you to heal him. Recovered girl? Oh yeah. Izuku was entirely freaking out right now. Not only was she one of the best heroines out there, but her quirk literally drained you of your energy until you passed out. Izuku was not passing out in front of 2 heroes. Izuku backed away. Yeah, this was a mistake. Forgot I was even here, actually. Before he'd even think about taking another step, a familiar scarf wrapped around his torso, keeping him in his place. He's severely injured. His identity doesn't matter. Will you help him or not? Izuku huffed and stagged and capped her weapon. So this is how it would be. Recovered girl's eyes were open over Izuku, her stare making him shudder. Yeah, he wanted to correct his previous statements. Their glares weren't the same. Recovered girl's was much worse. Regardless of her intimidating demeanor, she stepped aside to let him in. You owe me for this, she said, and Izuku tensed, thinking she meant him, but Eraserhead nodded. I know. Eraserhead dragged him in, much to Izuku's chagrin. He didn't let go until they made it to what looked like Recovered Girl's living room, which he dumped onto the couch. She turned on the lamps. What are we dealing with here, dearie? Recovered Girl asked him, and Izuku instinctively looked at Eraserhead. For what? Approval? He wasn't sure. Eraser nodded, his head down, and Izuku sighed. A burn on my left shoulder. Alright, that doesn't sound too bad. Can you take your sweater off for me? She said, coming closer so she could inspect the wound. Izuku scooted back and narrowed his eyes at her. No way. Recovered Girl didn't seem, deterred, though. Do you want some privacy? From Eraserhead? Izuku glanced at him, but the hero was unreadable. Yeah, that probably helped a lot, actually. He wouldn't be able to sense his judging gaze. Yes, please, Izuku muttered, not really looking at them for a reaction. Nothing was said when Eraserhead footstep proceeded into another room. He could breathe a little easier. I won't make you take your mask off, dear, but that sweater needs to come off. Recovery girl broke the silence. Her turned neutral. Izuku took a deep breath before he obliged, made sure his mask was still completely in place before taking it off completely. His eyes were still on the floor, not waiting to see her reaction either. He knew he had several scars on his body from over the years. Old and new, but nothing was as severe as a burn on his shoulder. Well, almost nothing. Without being asked to, Izuku turned so the heroine could have a look at it. She gasped. How are you still standing? She demanded. Izuku shrugged. Pure sprite and adrenaline, he joked, but she didn't quite laugh. Do you know how my quirk works? She asked that. Izuku nodded. Alright, we may have to do this in phases. We'll see how it goes, she said, and without warning, pressed her lips on the unpart part of his shoulder. He immediately passed out. When he regained consciousness, he was lying on the couch on his stomach, a blanket draped over him. Miraculously, he didn't feel any pain upon waking up. He did hear murmurs coming from the room, but he couldn't make them out. Izuku pushed himself up onto his elbows, testing his body. He felt relatively still fine, but he knew his burn wasn't completely healed. Maybe that's what she meant by phases. He sat up fully, keeping a blanket around his shoulders. Do I really need any more? I feel great. The muttering paused, followed by shuffling footsteps approaching the living room. Yes, dear, you do. Do you often downplay your injuries this much? Izuku shrugged. Maybe? The recovered girl shook her head. Okay, one more time, was her warning before she used her quirk again. Izuku passed out once more. He felt a lot more energized the second time he woke up. From looks at the windows by the door, it was still dark. Good. He still had time to make it home without waking his mom. Thank God it was Friday. Izuku stood up and quickly shrugged on his sweatshirt. He turned his head, trying to find Recover Girl, but found Eraserhead instead. Oh shit, he was still here? Hey, am I free to go? Or Izuku trailed off and Eraserhead turned it to face him. He stood up and walked over, but stopped a good distance away. She said you were fine for now, but to keep an eye on it over the next couple days. I still think you should stay at home and rest for the weekend. Izuku hummed noncommittally. We'll see. Eraserhead sighed. I figured. It's way past my patrol time, so I need to get going. Do you need me to walk you home? I'm not a child, Eraser. I walk myself home. Have been every night. You quite literally are a child, but thought I'd offer anyways. Don't drop down on the way back then. Izuku beamed. No promises, he explained before taking his exit. He was further from home, but he went the longer way anyways in case someone, a certain underground hero, decided to follow. He didn't feel his presence, but you can never be too sure. He did wish he could have thanked the recovery girl, though. She didn't have to waste her quirk on someone like him, but she did it anyways and asked for nothing in return. The Midoriya Eraserhead, it made him uneasy. He wasn't used to this. Regardless, he felt amazing. Seriously, he hadn't been this pain-free in a long time. He was sure Recover Girl's quirk somehow healed other scars that were bothering him, but he didn't care to look after it. If he ever saw her again, he would get her a gift or something. Izuku had the best sleep of his life when he got... Wow, not knife, life! Izuku had the best sleep of his life when he got home. Over that weekend, his mom was home during the day unless she was called in, so Izuku spent his time away from the apartment at a small cafe a few blocks down. It was run by a kind old lady who gave him free pasties, no matter how much he insisted he pay. This little money had come from a monthly allowance from his mom. He supposed it was her way of parenting, and while it came in handy, especially since he had been saving for a long time, he missed how his mom used to be. To bring his backpack so he could do work on homework, he made his way to the cafe. It was a bit early for lunch, a rush hour, but also late for the morning rush. It was a perfect in-between time to get there. There were only 2 people sitting inside, 1 person in line. Izuku stood nervously in line. He could fight villains and crime easily, but conversations with someone his age? Terrifying. The barista behind the register today was a teenager around his age or older with wild purple hair and eye pegs that rivaled his and Eraser's. He just looked perpetually tired. His name tag read Shinsou. Izuku had seen him working here before, but their interactions only went as far as him ordering and Shinsou calling out his name to get said order. Once it was his turn, Izuku stepped out to the counter. Good morning. What can I get for you today? Shinsou asked, his voice monotone. Izuku shyly smiled before ordering. Can I get an iced vanilla latte and a blueberry muffin, please? Nailed it! Shinsou put it into the register, not even looking up, and he said, anything else? No, that's all. Alright, here's your total. Shinsou rattled off the number, and Izuku gave him the cash. Thanks, your order will be ready soon. And he promptly walked off to the coffee machine. Izuku nodded to himself and walked over to the pickup area, waiting patiently. It didn't take long. Shinsou didn't even have to call his name out. He just laid over the drink in a small container for his muffin. Enjoy, as Shinsou remarked before going to the background. Izuku didn't have time to say thank you, so he went to sit in the far corner. The latte was delicious. As always, his muffin was great. He took a small bites, because this was most likely his lunch and dinner. For the next few hours, he spent his time on schoolwork. It honestly didn't take long, but he had gotten into the rhythm of only answering partially correct, so he wasn't accused of cheating, but enough to pass the teacher's suspicion. The majority of his time was spent on hero analysis. Now, even though his encounter with All Might had pretty much made him do 180 on his perception of heroes, he still loved analyzing quirks. He didn't have quite the budget to buy a whole new notebook, so he was writing in a damaged one courtesy of Bakugou. Some pages were salvaged, and Izuku could write small if he really tried. He was so lost in thought that he didn't realize what time it was. The cafe was closing soon. The only reason he knew of this was because the sweet old woman he mentioned earlier had visited his table. Darling, have you been here all day again? Her voice came from above him. Startled, he looked up at her. Karamira? Kirobero-san, of course not, he said with a nervous laugh. Please call me Hana. No need for such formalities. She always insisted, but Izuku still felt weird about using her given name. I'm sorry for staying so late. I'll pack up right away. He rushed to pack his things, but Kimura shook her head. You're alright. Technically, we don't close for another 15 minutes. Take your time, she said kindly, sliding him a wrapped Danish. Before he'd even try to pay her for it, she was walking away. Izuku sighed, but packed the pastry with a muttered thanks. Izuku left, taking his time getting home. He was fortunate not to run into anyone he knew today. While the cafe wasn't frequented by his classmates, well, as far as he knew, he still felt anxious walking alone. When he walked up to his apartment, he could tell something was wrong before he even walked in the door. Fumbling with his keys, he casually opened the door. Cautiously opened the door. He almost expected his mom to be standing there, waiting to berate him for something. However, it was empty. Almost literally. Most of the personalized decor had been hanging down. His mom's shoes and coat gone, and whatever pictures of the family that stayed out were also gone. His heart went in his stomach. Izuku stepped into the room. "Mom?" He called out hesitantly, as if she would materialize out of thin air. But he knew. There was a note on the kitchen counter with shaky hands. He picked it up. The note read, "I'm sorry, but I can't take it anymore. I can't live like this. I got an apartment closer to where I work. Don't come looking for me. There are 2 months of rent paid ahead, and that is all I can afford to pay for you. Plus the money left with this note. You are not my responsibility anymore." Funny, the words were blurry at the end there. He couldn't read the rest. Izuku put the note down, letting his tears stain the page. Well, shit, you did not expect that. And the authors. The endnotes. I have kind of thrown you all in the middle of the plot. Lol, so if things are confusing, that is most likely intentional. Things will be explained/revealed as we go on, like how and why Izuku have vigilante, and why Eraserhead is not actively trying to arrest him. P.S. I am terrible at names, so if you have vigilante ideas, feel free to leave them. And now, my notes. So, it's Goldwings 42 again, recording the outro later because Mom came in and interrupted me, so... yeah, that was chapter 1 of Learning How to Live Again, Am I Truly Worth It, by nstlgia. Great fic, go check it out. Gave kudos in AO3, please. Yeah, so, if you liked, leave a comment here, leave a comment on their fic, or something like that, and I will see you in the next video. Yeah, live your life, and don't die. Also, drink water and such. Yeah. Adios.